The 18-year-old girl stood on the frozen Vermont highway, her pregnant belly straining against a thin coat as snow whipped around her trembling frame. Jack Turner's headlights caught her figure, a ghost in the blizzard. Thumb raised hope fading with each car that passed. His truck slowed, windshield wipers fighting the storm. One choice, one open door, would transform a broken clock repairman's quiet life into something neither of them could imagine. Stick around to see how a single act of kindness becomes a miracle, and drop a comment about where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The clock on Jack Turner's dashboard read 11:47 p.m. when he first saw her. December 23rd. The kind of Vermont night that made even locals question why anyone chose to live this far north. The thermometer had given up trying somewhere below -15, and the snow came sideways, angry and relentless, turning Route 108 into a tunnel of white static. Jack had been driving this road for 23 years, knew every curve and pothole like the lines on his weathered hands. Tonight, though, something made him slow down near the abandoned Texaco station, the one that had been closed since the recession hit. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way his daughter Emma had looked at him during dinner, asking why they never helped at the church drives anymore, why they kept to themselves so much since Mama died. The figure materialized from the snow like something from a nightmare or a prayer, depending on how you looked at it. A girl no barely more than a child herself, standing at the road's edge with her thumb out. Her coat, if you could call it that, was the kind of cheap polyester thing they sold at discount stores, meant for autumn. Maybe, certainly not for a night that could kill you in 20 minutes. But it was her belly that made Jack's foot find the brake pedal. Round and unmistakable beneath that useless coat. Pregnant. Jesus Christ, pregnant and hitchhiking in a blizzard. He'd picked up exactly 3 hitchhikers in his entire life. Once in college when he still believed the world was fundamentally good. Once on his honeymoon with Sarah when they'd given a ride to an old woman who turned out to be heading to her son's funeral. And once 5 years ago, 2 weeks after Sarah's death, when he'd picked up a man just to have anyone in the passenger seat who didn't know his wife was gone. This would be the 4th. The truck fishtailed slightly as he pulled over, hazard lights painting the snow orange in rhythmic pulses. Through the passenger window, he could see her more clearly now, dark hair plastered to her skull lips that had passed blue and gone toward purple. Her thumb still up, but her arm shaking so violently it looked like she was waving. Jack reached across and cranked the passenger door handle. The door swung open and winter invaded his cab like a living thing. "Get in," he said, having to raise his voice over the wind. She didn't move at first, just stared at him with eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. Brown eyes huge in her thin face, calculating risks and chances. "I'm not," she started, then stopped. "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for money. Get in before you freeze to death." She climbed up into the cab with difficulty, her pregnant belly making the high step awkward. The door slammed shut and suddenly the world was quieter. Just the hum of the heater and the rhythmic thump of the wipers. "Thank you," she said, teeth chattering so hard the words came out broken. "Thank you." Jack cranked the heat higher, angling the vents toward her. In the dim light of the dashboard, he could see her better. 18, maybe 19. Pretty in that way that would become beautiful if life gave her half a chance. A small backpack at her feet, the kind kids took to school. Her hands, when she held them to the heating vent, were scraped raw. "How long were you out there?" 2 hours. Maybe 3. Jesus. Jack put the truck in gear, checking his mirrors, though nothing had moved on this road since he'd left town. "Were you heading here anywhere?" She paused. "South, somewhere warm." "Bus station's in Montpelier, closed till morning, but there's a Denny's nearby. They'll let you sit if you buy coffee." She nodded, still shivering. Her hand went to her belly, protective, unconscious. "How far along?" Jack asked, then immediately regretted it. Not his business. 7 months. Her voice was steadier now, the heat working its magic. 7.5. They drove in silence for a mile too. The snow kept coming heavier now. The kind of storm that would have people telling stories for years. Remember that Christmas when the Carlson's roof caved in. Remember when the power was out for 5 days. "What's your name?" Jack finally asked. "Sophie." She hesitated. "Sophie Reed." "Jack Turner. I repair clocks in Stowe Village." She looked at him, then really looked. saw what everyone saw: a man in his 40s who'd aged 10 years in the last 3. Flannel shirt, work boots, hands that knew their way around tools, wedding ring still on his finger, though his wife was 2 years in the ground. Clocks? She repeated. That's specific. Grandfather clocks mainly. Antiques. Things that were built to last longer than the people who bought them. He glanced at her. You running from someone, boyfriend, parents. Sophie turned back to the window. Parents. They wanted me to, take care of it. Said I was ruining my life, ruining their reputation. My dad's a select man in Woodstock. Image matters. And the father, the baby's father, tracked scholarship to Syracuse. His parents got lawyers involved. Made it clear I was on my own if I kept it. Jack felt the familiar anger rise in his chest, the kind he'd been feeling more often since Sarah died. Anger at the unfairness of everything, at how the world chewed up the vulnerable and spat them out. How old are you, Sophie? 18, turned 18 last month. They were approaching the turnoff to Montpelier, but Jack could barely see the exit sign through the storm. The radio turned low, crackled with emergency broadcasts. Stay off the roads, seek shelter, historic blizzard conditions. Listen, Jack said, surprising himself. This storm's getting worse. They're saying it might be the worst in 20 years. Montpelier's still 40 minutes in good weather, and this... He gestured at the white wall beyond the windshield. This isn't good weather. Sophie's hand tightened on her belly. I don't have money for a motel. I've got a cabin about 10 minutes from here. Nothing fancy, but it's warm. You can wait out the storm, leave in the morning when the roads are clear. She studied him with those 2 old eyes. You have a family. A daughter. Emma. She's 12. He swallowed. Lost my wife 2 years ago. Cancer. Something in Sophie's face softened. Maybe it was the mention of Emma, or maybe it was the way he said cancer, like the word itself was a wound. I don't want to impose. You'll freeze to death if you keep going tonight. That's not imposing, that's just sense. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, just tonight. Jack took the next exit, a barely visible ramp that led to the back roads he knew by feel more than sight. The truck struggled through drifts that were already knee-high and growing. Twice they slid the back end floating dreamlike before the tires found purchase again. You're good at this, Sophie said, gripping the door handle. Lived here all my life. You learn to stay home. The cabin appeared suddenly in the headlights, a 2-story log structure with smoke still trickling from the chimney. The porch light was on. Emma always left it on when he worked late, said it was so he could find his way home. Though they both knew it was really so, she could pretend Mom might walk through the door. It's beautiful, Sophie said softly. It's home. They sat in the truck for a moment after he parked, engine ticking as it cooled. The snow had created a perfect silence, the kind that made you feel like the last people on Earth. Your daughter, will she mind? Emma doesn't mind anything that breaks routine. She's been after me to do something different for months. Jack opened his door. Come on, let's get you inside before you freeze. The walk to the front door was only 20 feet, but the wind tried to knock them sideways twice. Jack kept his hand on Sophie's elbow, steadying her. She moved carefully, protecting her belly feet, unsure on the icy walkway. The warmth inside hit them like a physical thing. Jack had left the wood stove burning, and the cabin smelled like cedar and coffee and the chocolate chip cookies Emma had made after school. Sophie stood in the doorway, dripping melting snow onto the mat, looking lost. Dad? Emma's voice came from upstairs. Is that you? Yeah, sweetheart, come down here a minute. Footsteps on the stairs, quick and light. Emma appeared in her pajamas, the ones with the penguin pattern she claimed she was too old for but still wore anyway. She stopped when she saw Sophie. Oh, hi. Emma, this is Sophie. She's going to wait out the storm here. Sophie, my daughter, Emma. Emma's eyes went immediately to Sophie's belly, then back to her face. Jack could see his daughter's mind working, processing this unexpected change to their careful routine. Hi, Sophie said, her voice small. I'm sorry to intrude. Your dad was kind enough. Are you having a baby? Emma interrupted, then immediately blushed. Sorry, that was rude. Mom always said I had no filter. It's okay. Sophie managed a small smile. Yes, I'm having a baby. When? About 2 months. Is it a boy or girl? A girl? Emma's face lit up. I always wanted a sister. I mean, not that I just meant. She stopped, flustered. Emma, why don't you show Sophie the guest room? She needs to get warm and dry. It's not really a guest room, Emma said, leading Sophie toward the stairs. It's Mom's old craft room, but Dad put a bed in there last year when Grandma came to visit. She said the stairs were going to kill her, but I think she just wanted to snoop through Mom's things. Their voices faded as they climbed the stairs. Jack stood in his living room, dripping on his own floor, wondering what the hell he'd just done. The smart thing would have been to drive her to Montpelier, storm or no storm. Leave her at the Denny's with $20 for coffee and breakfast. Stay uninvolved. Stay safe in his bubble of grief and routine. But then he thought about Sarah, what she would have said. Sarah, who brought home stray cats and lonely grocery clerks for Thanksgiving and always said yes when someone needed help. He could almost hear her voice, Jack Turner, you did exactly right. Now go make that girl something to eat. She's skin and bones, and she's eating for two. By the time Jack had changed into dry clothes and heated up leftover stew, Emma and Sophie had returned to the kitchen. Sophie wore one of Sarah's old sweaters. Emma must have dug it out of the closet. It was huge on her, making her look even younger. I hope it's okay, Sophie said, plucking at the sweater. Emma said, It's fine. Jack set a bowl of stew in front of her. Eat. She ate like she hadn't seen food in days, which Jack realized might not be far from the truth. Emma sat across from her chin, propped on her hands, watching with the intensity she usually reserved for her science experiments. Don't stare, Jack said. I'm not staring. I'm observing. Sophie smiled a little at that. What are you observing? That? You're scared, Emma said matter-of-factly. But not of us. Of something else. Emma, it's okay, Sophie said. She looked at Emma directly. You're right. I am scared. Of having the baby. Of everything after. Emma considered this. My mom used to say being scared just means you're about to do something really brave. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back, but one escaped rolling down her cheek. Your mom sounds smart. She was, Emma said simply. She died, but she was really smart before that. The kitchen fell quiet except for the wind howling outside and the tick of the grandfather clock in the living room, one of the few Jack had kept for himself, its rhythm as familiar as his own heartbeat. You can stay, Emma announced suddenly. I mean, if you want. The storm's supposed to last 3 days, the radio said. Jack started to object. This was his decision, not Emma's, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Sophie's hand had gone protectively to her belly again. Maybe it was the way Emma looked more animated than she'd been in months. Or maybe it was just the sound of the storm outside reminding him how cruel the world could be to those without shelter. We'll see what the morning brings, he said finally. Sophie nodded, tears still threatening. Thank you. Both of you. I thank you. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Sophie around the cabin, chattering about everything and nothing. This is where Mom painted. This is where Dad fixes clocks. This is my room. Do you want to see my rock collection? Sophie followed, patient and kind, asking questions that made Emma beam. Jack watched from the doorway, nursing a cup of coffee. The house felt different with Sophie in it, fuller somehow, like a clock that had been running slow suddenly finding its proper rhythm. Later, after Emma had gone to bed and Sophie had retreated to the craft room, Jack sat by the wood stove feeding it logs for the night. The storm had intensified, wind screaming around the corners of the cabin. He thought about Sophie out there on the road, what would have happened if he'd driven past like everyone else. Thought about choices made in seconds that changed everything. A floorboard creaked. Sophie stood at the bottom of the stairs, one hand on her belly, the other clutching a notebook. Couldn't sleep. The baby's active at night. She kicks like she's trying to escape. Jack smiled slightly. Emma was the same. Sarah used to say she was practicing her soccer moves. Sophie moved closer to the fire, sat carefully in Sarah's old rocking chair. Jack didn't tell her that no one had sat there in 2 years. I've been writing her letters, Sophie said, holding up the notebook. The baby, for when she's older. In case... She trailed off. In case what? In case I have to give her up. So she knows I loved her even if I couldn't keep her. Jack felt something twist in his chest. Are you considering adoption? I don't know. Maybe. What kind of life can I give her? I'm 18, no job, no family support. I couldn't even keep myself warm tonight. You were doing what you had to do. Was I, or was I just running? She opened the notebook pages covered in neat handwriting. I write about everything, the first time I felt her kick, the foods she seems to like, the songs I sing to her. She paused. Tonight, I'll write about the man who stopped when no one else would. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire. The clock in the corner chimed midnight, Christmas Eve. Do you have traditions? Sophie asked. You and Emma. We used to, haven't done much since Sarah died. Emma pretends it doesn't matter, but it does. Yeah, it does. Sophie stood with difficulty, the notebook still in her hand. Maybe this year could be different. I mean, I'll be gone tomorrow or the next day, but maybe just having someone here. Maybe. Jack agreed. She said goodnight and headed back upstairs. Jack stayed by the fire, feeding it steadily, listening to the storm and thinking about traditions, about change, about the way life sometimes forced you to choose between safety and kindness. Around 2 a.m, he finally headed to bed. He paused at the craft room door, which was slightly ajar. Inside, he could hear Sophie singing softly a lullaby he recognized but couldn't name, singing to her unborn daughter in a stranger's house while the world raged white and deadly outside. He thought about knocking, asking if she needed anything. But sometimes he'd learned people just needed to know someone was near. So he went to his room, lay in his too-empty bed, and listened to the wind and the distant lullaby until sleep finally took him. He woke to Emma shaking his shoulder and weak sunlight streaming through the window. Dad. Dad. It snowed 5 feet. The road's completely gone. Jack sat up disoriented. The bedside clock read 9:17. He never slept that late. And Sophie's making breakfast. She said she wanted to contribute something, and I told her about the special Christmas Eve pancakes Mom used to make, and she said she knew how to make those, and Emma paused for breath. Can she stay? Please, just for Christmas. Through the floor, Jack could smell coffee and bacon and, yes, pancakes. Could hear Sophie moving around his kitchen like she belonged there. It's not that simple. Why not? She has nowhere to go. We have room, and it's Christmas. Jack looked at his daughter, really looked. She was smiling genuinely, smiling for the first time in months. The kind of smile that reached her eyes, the kind he'd been afraid he'd never see again. We'll ask her, he said finally. But if she wants to leave. Emma was already gone, thundering down the stairs. Sophie, Dad says you can stay for Christmas. That wasn't what he'd said, but as Jack pulled on his clothes and headed downstairs, he realized it was what he'd meant. The kitchen was transformed. Sophie had found Sarah's good plates, the ones they only used for holidays. She'd set the table with Emma's help. Jack could tell by the slightly crooked napkins, folded into shapes that were supposed to be swans, but looked more like wounded origami. I hope this is okay, Sophie said when she saw him. Emma said, It's perfect, Jack said, and meant it. They ate breakfast together, the 3 of them, while outside the snow continued to fall. Emma chattered about everything the fort they could build, the cookies they could bake, how Sophie could help decorate the tree they hadn't bothered to put up yet. We have a tree, Jack asked. In the barn. Mom always got one the first week of December, but... Emma shrugged. We didn't this year. We could get it today, Sophie offered. I mean, if you want help. Jack looked between them, his daughter bright-eyed with possibility. This stranger who wasn't quite a stranger anymore offering to help fill a tradition-shaped hole in their Christmas. Yeah, he said. Let's get the tree. It took all 3 of them to drag the artificial tree from the barn, fighting through drifts that came up to Emma's waist. Sophie shouldn't have been lifting anything, but she insisted on helping carrying the lightest boxes of ornaments, while Jack and Emma handled the tree itself. Inside, they set it up in the corner where it always went, where Sarah had always put it. The branches were tangled from a year in storage, and it took an hour to get them all spread properly. Sophie sat in the rocking chair sorting ornaments while her baby kicked and rolled. "This one's beautiful," she said, holding up a glass angel. "Mom made that," Emma said. "Our first Christmas. She said every tree needs an angel." The ornament caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows on the wall. Sophie handed it carefully to Emma, who climbed on a chair to place it on top. They decorated slowly, each ornament with its own story. The pickle from their trip to Germany, the tiny clock Jack had made for Sarah their first year together, the handprint ornaments from Emma's preschool years. "We should make one for this year," Emma said suddenly. "Mom always said every Christmas should add something to the tree." "What would we make?" Jack asked. Emma looked at Sophie. "Something for the baby, so when she sees it someday, she'll know she spent a Christmas with us." Sophie's eyes filled again. She'd been crying on and off all day, hormones, she said, but Jack suspected it was more than that. "I'd like that," she whispered. They spent the afternoon crafting Emma with construction paper and glitter, Jack whittling a small wooden star, Sophie knitting with yarn Emma had found in Sarah's supplies. The storm continued outside, but inside the cabin was warm and bright, filled with the kind of purposeful activity Jack had forgotten could exist. By evening, they had their ornaments. Emma's was a paper snowflake with Christmas 2014 written in glitter. Jack's star had Baby Reed's first Christmas carved carefully into the wood. Sophie had knitted a tiny booty no bigger than Jack's thumb. "It's perfect," Emma declared, hanging them all together on a middle branch. "Now the tree knows we're all here." That night after Emma had gone to bed, Jack and Sophie sat by the tree watching the lights twinkle. The storm had finally begun to ease, though the weather report said the roads wouldn't be clear for at least 2 more days. "I should leave when they open," Sophie said quietly. "You've been too kind already." "Where will you go?" "South, maybe North Carolina. I heard there's work there and it's warmer." "What kind of work?" "Anything, waitressing, retail." She touched her belly. "Until she comes." "And after?" Sophie didn't answer for a long time. "I don't know. That's the part I can't see past. The after." Jack thought about Sarah, about the plans they'd made that cancer had stolen, about the after they'd never gotten to have. "Sometimes you can't see past something until you're through it," he said. "Sometimes you just have to trust that there's something on the other side." "Is there on the other side of grief?" Jack looked at the tree, at the new ornaments hanging next to the old. "I'm starting to think there might be." They sat quietly watching the fire die to embers. Finally, Sophie stood to go to bed. She paused at the stairs. "Jack, why did you stop?" "Really?" He thought about it. "Because my wife would have. Because my daughter needed to see that we still help people. Because..." He paused. "Because something told me to." Sophie nodded, like that made perfect sense. "Good night, Jack. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Sophie." After she went upstairs, Jack stayed by the tree a while longer. He found himself talking to Sarah, something he hadn't done in months. "She needs help," he said to the empty room. "More than just a few nights' shelter. She's got nobody, Sarah. Nobody but that baby." The house creaked and settled around him, the familiar sounds that usually meant loneliness, but tonight felt like something else. Like approval, maybe. Like permission. Christmas morning arrived with brilliant sunshine on fresh snow, the kind of light that hurt your eyes but lifted your heart. Emma was up at dawn, bounding into Jack's room. "It's Christmas, and Sophie's still here, and it stopped snowing." Jack groaned and pulled a pillow over his head. "What time is it? Time for presents?" "We don't have any presents, Em. We didn't..." "Yes, we do. I made things. And Sophie made things. Come on." Downstairs, the tree was surrounded by small wrapped packages, Emma's handiwork, Jack could tell, with their too much tape and crooked bows. Sophie was already up, sitting in the rocking chair with a cup of tea. "Merry Christmas," she said, smiling. She looked better. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and some color had returned to her cheeks. "Emma insisted on presents," she explained. "I hope it's okay." They opened gifts sitting on the floor like children. Emma had made everyone drawings. Sophie's was a picture of the 3 of them by the tree. Sophie had knitted scarves from Sarah's yarn, soft and warm and slightly uneven. Jack felt embarrassed that he had nothing to give until Emma said, "Dad, you gave us Christmas. That's your present." The day unfolded gently. They made too much food, played board games, took turns reading from Emma's favorite books. Sophie taught them card games her grandmother had shown her. Emma showed Sophie her rock collection, explaining each specimen in detail. As afternoon faded to evening, Jack found himself in the kitchen with Sophie, while Emma dozed on the couch, exhausted from the excitement. "The roads will be clear tomorrow," Sophie said. "The radio said the plows are out." "Yeah, I should go." "Where?" "I told you, south." Jack dried the dish in his hands, slowly thinking. "What if you didn't—" Sophie looked at him, startled. What if you stayed? Just until the baby comes. You need somewhere safe, somewhere warm. We have room." "Jack, you don't even know me." "I know you're 18 and alone. I know you're brave enough to keep a baby everyone told you to give up. I know you're kind to my daughter. I know you need help." He set down the dish. "Sarah would have offered without hesitation. I'm not as good as she was, but I'm trying." Sophie's hands went to her belly, protective as always. "What about when the baby comes? Babies cry. They need things. It would disrupt your whole life." "My life's already disrupted. Has been for 2 years." He looked toward the living room where Emma slept. "Maybe disruption isn't always bad. I can't pay rent. Don't want rent, but maybe you could help with Emma. After school when I'm working. She's been staying at the neighbors, but she hates it." Sophie was crying again, silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Why are you doing this?" Jack thought about all the complicated reasons about grief and loneliness and the way the cabin had felt alive these past 2 days. But in the end, he said the simplest truth because it's right. Sophie wiped her eyes with her sleeve, Sarah's sleeve, really. "Can I think about it?" "Of course." That night, the three of them watched the stars come out clearer than they'd been in weeks. The snow sparkled in the moonlight, pristine and perfect. Emma, awake again, pointed out constellations she'd learned from her mother. "That's Orion," she said. "Mom said he was a hunter, but I think he looks more like he's dancing." "Everything looks like dancing to you," Jack said, ruffling her hair. "Sophie, do you know any constellations?" Emma asked. "Just one. The North Star. My grandmother said if you're ever lost, find the North Star and you can find your way home." "But what if you don't have a home?" Emma asked with the innocent directness of children. Sophie looked at Jack, then at Emma. "Then maybe you follow it until you find one." The next morning, Jack woke early and made coffee, expecting to find Sophie packed and ready to leave. Instead, he found her in the rocking chair writing in her notebook. "Morning," she said without looking up. "Morning. Writing to the baby. Actually," she closed the notebook. "Writing to you, a list of things I can do to help, if the offer's still open." Jack sat down across from her. "It's open." "Then yes, I'll stay until I figure out what comes next." Emma, who had apparently been listening from the stairs, let out a whoop and came running. "Really? You're staying?" "For a while?" Sophie said carefully. "If that's okay." "It's more than okay. We can fix up the craft room better, and I can help with the baby when she comes, and—" Emma stopped suddenly. "Wait, what's the baby's name?" Sophie looked down at her belly. "Grace? Her name is Grace." "Grace?" Emma repeated. "I like it. It sounds like something good is about to happen." Jack met Sophie's eyes over Emma's head. Something in her face had shifted, opened, like she was allowing herself for the first time in months to hope. "Yeah," Sophie said softly. "Something good." Outside, the snowplow rumbled past, clearing the road, opening the way to anywhere Sophie might have gone. But inside the cabin, with morning light streaming through the windows and Emma chattering about all the things they could do together, Sophie stayed. She picked up her knitting, a tiny sweater for Grace, and began another row, her fingers steady and sure. Jack watched them, his daughter and this young woman who'd appeared out of the storm, and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it. The promise that life, despite all evidence to the contrary, could still surprise you with unexpected gifts. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 9 times, marking the hour. marking the moment when three lonely people began the delicate process of becoming something else. Something more. A family, maybe. In time. But for now, it was enough that they were warm, they were safe, and they were together. The storm had passed, leaving the world white and new and full of possibilities. Sophie began a new letter in her notebook. Dear Grace, today I found something I wasn't looking for. A man who fixes broken clocks, and a girl who collects rocks and sees dancers in the stars. They've given us shelter, but more than that, they've given us hope. Your mama was lost, little one, following her North Star down an empty highway. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, the star leads you exactly where you need to be. Sometimes it leads you home. The weeks that followed Christmas melted into each other like snow running off the roof in sudden January sunshine. Sophie had unpacked her meager belongings into the craft room, which Emma insisted on calling Sophie's room. Now, though Sophie still felt like she was borrowing someone else's space. Sarah's supplies still filled the closets, yarn sorted by color canvases that would never be painted, brushes standing at attention in mason jars like soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. You can move those things, Jack had said one morning, finding Sophie carefully working around a stack of oil paints. Sarah wouldn't mind, but Sophie had shaken her head. They're not bothering me. Besides, sometimes Grace kicks extra hard when I'm near the yarn. I think she likes the colors. It was these small kindnesses that undid Jack the way Sophie treated Sarah's memory with such tenderness, as if she understood that grief needed space to breathe in a house before it could start to heal. The routine they developed came naturally without discussion or planning. Sophie woke early, her pregnant body uncomfortable in any position for long, and started the coffee. Jack would find her at the kitchen table writing in her notebook by the light of a single lamp, the rest of the house still dark. Another letter to Grace, he'd ask. Always. She'd reply, not looking up. I want her to know everything, even the small things, especially the small things. By the time Emma thundered down the stairs, breakfast would be ready. Nothing fancy, just eggs and toast, sometimes pancakes if Sophie felt ambitious. Emma had taken to Sophie with the fierce loyalty of a child who'd been lonely too long, following her around the house, asking endless questions about the baby. Can I feel her kick? Does she have hair yet? What if she doesn't like me? Impossible, Sophie would say to that last one, guiding Emma's hand to the spot where Grace was performing her morning gymnastics. She already knows your voice. You're going to be her favorite person. Jack watched these interactions from the doorway of his workshop, where he'd relocated his clock repair business after Sarah died, unable to face the sympathy of customers at the shop in town. The steady tick-tock of multiple timepieces filled the barn, a mechanical heartbeat that had once comforted him, but now seemed to mock the way time kept moving without Sarah. But something was shifting. The clocks didn't sound mournful anymore. They sounded like possibility. One afternoon in late January, Sophie struggled to get comfortable in the rocking chair, her belly now huge at 8 months. Jack was adjusting the escapement on a particularly stubborn grandmother clock when she appeared in his workshop doorway. Jack, I need to tell you something. He set down his tools, worried. Is it the baby? Are you... No, Grace is fine. It's just... She moved into the workshop, running her finger along the edge of his workbench. My parents called the Thompsons. The neighbors... They wanted to know if anyone had seen me. Jack's hands stilled. What did the Thompsons say? Nothing. Mrs. Thompson told them she hadn't seen any young pregnant girls around, but Jack, if they're looking... She trailed off one hand, protective on her belly. They can't make you go back. You're 18. I know, but my father, he's persistent. He doesn't like loose ends, and a pregnant daughter who ran away is a pretty big loose end. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Jack found Sophie on the porch, despite the cold, wrapped in one of Sarah's quilts, watching the stars. You're scared they'll find you, he said, settling into the chair beside her. I'm scared they'll make me feel like that girl again. The one who was ruining everything just by existing. She pulled the quilt tighter. Here with you and Emma, I don't feel like her. I feel like maybe I could actually do this. Be a mother, be something more than a disappointment. You are more than that. How do you know you've known me a month? Jack thought about it. I know because I watch you with Emma. I see how patient you are when she asks the same question 5 times. I see how you've brought music back into this house. Don't think I haven't heard you singing while you cook. I see how you treat Sarah's things with respect, how you've made yourself useful without being asked. He paused. I see how you love that baby already, even though she's brought you nothing but trouble. Sophie was crying again. She cried so easily these days. She hasn't brought me trouble. She brought me here. Then maybe, Jack said carefully, you should stop running from where you came from and start running toward where you're going. The next morning, Sophie asked to borrow the truck. I need to get some things for Grace. I've been putting it off, but she gestured at her belly. Running out of time. I'll drive you. No, I should do this myself, please. Jack handed her the keys, worried but trying not to show it. The roads are clear, but if you feel any contractions, I'll come straight back, promise. She was gone for 4 hours. Jack repaired exactly nothing, spending the time pacing between the window and his workbench. Emma, home from school with a cold, noticed his distraction. She'll come back, Dad. How do you know? Emma held up Sophie's notebook left on the kitchen table. She wouldn't leave this. It's all her letters to Grace. When Sophie finally returned, the truck bed was full of secondhand baby items, a crib, a car seat, boxes of tiny clothes. Where did you get all this? Jack asked, helping her unload. Goodwill mostly, and she hesitated. I went to the church in town. They have a program for young mothers. The woman there, Mrs. Chen, she was kind. Didn't ask questions, just helped. That's good, Sophie, I gave her my real name and this address. Jack stopped a box of diapers in his arms. Okay. I'm tired of hiding. If my parents want to find me, let them. I'm not going back, but I'm not going to live in fear either. She took the box from him. Besides, Mrs. Chen said something that made sense. She said sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay still and let the world catch up to you. That night, they set up the crib in Sophie's room. Emma directed operations with the seriousness of a battlefield general, insisting the crib needed to be by the window so Grace could see the stars, but not so close that she'd get cold. It needs to be perfect, Emma said. This is her first real thing, her first piece of the world that's just hers. Sophie stopped sorting baby clothes to hug Emma tight. You're going to be an amazing big sister. I'm not really her sister, though. Sure you are. Family isn't just blood, Em. Family is who shows up. Jack, wrestling with crib assembly instructions that seemed to be written in a language he didn't speak, felt something loosen in his chest. Sarah used to say the same thing usually when his difficult brother would cancel another visit, or his parents would make another excuse for missing Emma's birthday. Over the next week, the craft room transformed into a nursery. Not a Pinterest-perfect nursery, they didn't have the money for that, but something better. Emma painted a mural on one wall, a night sky full of dancing constellations. Jack built shelves from reclaimed barnwood. Sophie knitted blanket after blanket, her fingers flying, even when her eyes were closed, muscle memory from her grandmother's teaching taking over. It's perfect, Sophie said one evening, standing in the doorway surveying their work. She's going to have a perfect room. She's going to have more than that, Jack said quietly. February arrived with a fresh snowstorm, not as fierce as the one that had brought Sophie to them, but steady and relentless. Sophie was uncomfortable now, barely sleeping, walking the house at all hours like a restless spirit. I can't get comfortable, she complained one morning, tears of frustration in her eyes. Everything hurts, and I can't breathe, and I'm so tired, but I can't sleep, and... Come here, Jack said, guiding her to the couch. He disappeared into his bedroom and came back with a pregnancy pillow still in its packaging. Sophie stared at it. Where did you get this? I ordered it online. Emma helped me pick it out. We thought, well, you needed it. She clutched the pillow like a lifeline. Thank you. God, thank you. That afternoon, while Sophie napped successfully for the first time in weeks, the doorbell rang. Jack opened it to find a well-dressed couple in their 50s, the kind of people who looked like they'd never had a hair out of place in their lives. Mr. Turner, the man said, I'm William Reed. This is my wife, Patricia. I believe our daughter is staying with you. Jack's first instinct was to lie to protect Sophie from these people who'd driven her into a blizzard rather than accept their grandchild. But then he thought about what Sophie had said about not hiding anymore. She is. Would you like to come in? They sat stiffly in his living room, looking around with barely concealed judgment. Jack could see them cataloging everything, the worn furniture, the clock parts scattered on the coffee table, Emma's homework spread across the floor. We've come to take Sophia home, Patricia Reed said. She's clearly had some kind of breakdown, but we've found a nice facility. I'm not going anywhere. Sophie stood on the stairs, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the banister. She'd changed into one of her better outfits, Jack noticed, as if she'd heard her parents arrive and prepared for battle. Sophia, be reasonable, William Reed said. You're living with strangers. I'm living with friends, people who took me in when you threw me out. We didn't throw you out. We gave you a choice. Between my child and my family, that's not a choice, that's cruelty. Patricia's composure cracked slightly. We're trying to protect you. You're 18 years old. You have no idea what you're sacrificing. I know exactly what I'm sacrificing. College, probably. The life you planned for me, definitely. Your approval, absolutely. Sophie came down the stairs slowly, deliberately. But I know what I'm gaining too. This baby dad mom, she's not a mistake. She's not a problem to be solved. She's my daughter. And how do you propose to raise her? William's voice was cold. With no education, no money, no support. She has support, Jack said quietly. She has us. Both Reeds turned to look at him as if they'd forgotten he was there. And you are, Patricia's tone could have frozen water. I'm the man who found your daughter half frozen on the side of the road on Christmas Eve. I'm the one who's watched her work herself to exhaustion, trying to prepare for this baby with no help from the people who should love her most. I'm someone who actually gives a damn what happens to her. How dare you, How dare you? Jack stood, anger flooding through him. How dare you come here after abandoning her and act like you have any right to decide what's best for her? Emma chose that moment to come home from school, bursting through the door with her usual enthusiasm. She stopped dead when she saw the room full of tense adults. Sophie, are you okay? Sophie held out her hand and Emma went to her, immediately glaring at the strangers with suspicion. These are my parents. Emma's eyes widened. The ones who... She stopped, but her meaning was clear. Yes, Sophie said simply. Emma stepped slightly in front of Sophie, protective, despite being half her size. You should leave. You make Sophie cry. Emma, Jack warned, but he was proud of her. William Reed stood. We'll contest this. If you're living here, we'll make sure the authorities know exactly what kind of situation our daughter has gotten herself into. What kind of situation is that? Sophie asked. A safe home. People who care about me, a warm place for my daughter to be born. Go ahead, Dad. Call whoever you want. Tell them your pregnant teenage daughter found a better family than the one she was born into. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia Reed's face crumpled for just a moment, showing something that might have been regret, but William took her arm and steered her toward the door. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is, Sophie replied. It was over the day you chose your reputation over your daughter. After they left, Sophie collapsed on the couch, shaking. Emma curled up beside her, and Jack sat on her other side, the three of them forming a protective circle. They'll be back, Sophie whispered. Let them come, Jack said. This is your home now. They can't change that. Home? Sophie repeated like she was tasting the word. I'm going to put that in tonight's letter to Grace, the day I stood up to her grandparents in our home. That night, as February wind rattled the windows, Jack found himself in his workshop, unable to focus. The confrontation with the Reeds had shaken something loose in him, made him realize how much Sophie and the coming baby had become part of their lives. He picked up a piece of cherry wood he'd been saving for something special, not knowing what. Now he knew. He began to carve, letting his hands find the shape hidden in the grain, a tiny bird wing spread ready to fly. Inside the house, he could hear Sophie and Emma in the kitchen making cookies and singing along to the radio. Normal sounds, family sounds, the kind of sounds he'd thought were gone forever when Sarah died. His phone rang. Mrs. Chen from the church. Mr. Turner, I wanted to let you know that someone was asking about Sophie today. Her parents, I think. I didn't tell them anything, but I thought you should know they're not giving up. Thank you for the warning. How is she, Sophie? She's good, strong, ready, I think. That's good to hear. And Mr. Turner, what you're doing for that girl, Sarah would be proud. Jack's throat tightened. Mrs. Chen had known Sarah, of course. Everyone in town had known Sarah. I hope so. I know so. Sometimes angels send us exactly who we need exactly when we need them. After he hung up, Jack stood in his workshop surrounded by ticking clocks, each keeping its own time, none of them synchronized. He thought about time about Sarah, about Sophie appearing out of a blizzard like some kind of Christmas miracle. Maybe Mrs. Chen was right. Maybe Sarah had sent Sophie to them knowing they needed each other. He went back to his carving, working until his fingers cramped until the little bird was perfect. Tomorrow he'd start on a mobile for Grace's crib. Birds in flight reaching for sky they'd never touch but always trying anyway. Like all of them, really, reaching for something better, something more, something that looked like hope. A week later, Sophie's water broke at 3 in the morning. Jack heard her cry out and was at her door in seconds, Emma right behind him. It's time! Sophie gasped, gripping the doorframe. Oh God, it's really time! The hospital was 40 minutes away on good roads. Jack looked outside at the fresh snow falling, not a blizzard, but enough to make things dangerous. We need to go now, he said. Emma, get dressed. Warm clothes. I'm coming. We're family, Jack said firmly. We stick together. The drive was treacherous. Sophie moaning in the back seat with Emma holding her hand, whispering encouragement she'd probably learned from movies. Breathe, Sophie. Remember to breathe. I am breathing. Breathe better. Despite everything, Sophie laughed, then immediately cried out as another contraction hit. How far apart? Jack asked, taking a turn too fast, feeling the truck slide before catching. 5 minutes. Maybe 4. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The snow seemed to be falling faster, or maybe that was just his imagination. In the rearview mirror, he could see Sophie's face contorted with pain and determination. You're doing great, he said. We're almost there. Jack, Sophie's voice was small, scared. What if something goes wrong? Nothing's going wrong. You're strong. Grace is strong, and we're going to be there soon. But what if... Then we'll handle it. Together. That's what we do now, right? We handle things together. Emma squeezed Sophie's hand harder. Dad's right. We're together. All of us. Even Grace. She's just trying to come out to be with us. They made it to the hospital with minutes to spare. Sophie was fully dilated, ready to push, barely making it to a delivery room before Grace decided she'd waited long enough. I want them with me, Sophie gasped to the nurse. They're my family. The nurse looked at Jack, probably assuming he was the father, then at Emma. The girl should wait outside. Please, Sophie begged. Please, I need them both. The nurse relented, maybe seeing something in Sophie's eyes that said this wasn't a normal situation, that normal rules didn't apply here. What followed was 2 hours of the most intense experience of Jack's life since Sarah's death. Sophie was fierce, fighting through each contraction with a determination that reminded him of Sarah bringing Emma into the world. Emma stood by Sophie's head, stroking her hair, whispering a constant stream of encouragement. You're so strong, Sophie. You're doing so good. Grace is almost here. She's almost here. Jack held Sophie's other hand, letting her squeeze hard enough to bruise, not caring about anything except being present, being steady, being what she needed. I can't, Sophie sobbed at one point. I can't do this. You can, Jack said firmly. You are doing it. You're almost there. One more push, the doctor said. One more big push. Sophie bore down with everything she had left, a scream tearing from her throat that was pure power, pure determination, pure love. And then suddenly, a different cry filled the room, tiny, indignant, absolutely perfect. It's a girl, the doctor announced, unnecessarily placing the squirming, vernix-covered baby on Sophie's chest. Sophie was sobbing, laughing, shaking all at once. Hi, Grace. Hi, baby girl. I'm your mama, and I love you so much. Emma was crying too, and when Jack looked at her, he realized he was as well. They stood there, the three of them, clustered around this tiny new life, and Jack felt something shift in the universe, pieces clicking into place that he hadn't even known were scattered. "She's perfect," Emma breathed. "Look at her tiny fingers." Grace was indeed perfect, with a full head of dark hair like her mother's, and a powerful set of lungs that she was using to express her displeasure at being born. "Do you want to cut the cord?" the nurse asked Jack. He looked at Sophie, who nodded. His hands were steady as he made the cut, separating Grace from her mother physically, but not in any way that mattered. Later, after Grace had been cleaned and measured and declared healthy, after Sophie had been moved to a recovery room after the adrenaline had worn off, leaving them all exhausted, Jack sat in a chair holding Grace while Sophie slept. The baby was impossibly small in his arms, reminding him of holding Emma for the first time. But this was different. Emma had been his by blood, by law, by all the conventional measures. Grace was his by choice, by circumstance, by something that felt bigger than biology. "Hi, Grace," he whispered. "I'm Jack. I'm not your grandfather, not really, but I'm going to love you like one anyway. Your mama is very brave, you know, the bravest person I know. And Emma, that's the girl who's currently drooling on your mama's hospital bed. She's going to teach you everything about being fierce and funny and kind." Grace made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like acknowledgement. "And me? I'm going to teach you about time, how it moves in circles, not lines, how the important moments come back around if you're patient, how broken things can be fixed if you know where to look for the missing pieces." Sophie stirred, opened her eyes. "Is she okay?" "She's perfect. Want her back?" "Always." Jack transferred Grace carefully, watching Sophie's face transform with love and wonder as she looked at her daughter. "I did it," she whispered. "I really did it." "You did." "No, we did. I couldn't have... Jack, if you hadn't stopped that night..." "But I did stop. That's what matters." Emma woke up, then immediately alert. "Is Grace okay? Can I hold her?" Sophie showed Emma how to support Grace's head, how to hold her safe and secure. Emma's face was serious with responsibility and soft with wonder. "Hi, Grace," Emma said. "I'm Emma. I'm going to be your big sister, not by blood but by choice, which Mom always said was stronger anyway." Watching them, these three people who'd become his world, Jack thought about Sarah again, about loss and finding, about the way life could break you and remake you into something different, but not necessarily worse. About Grace, the concept, and the baby, and how both had arrived in a storm to save them all. "Thank you," Sophie said quietly, looking at Jack over Emma's head. "For everything." "Thank you," Jack replied, meaning it. "For coming out of the storm." Outside the hospital window, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks gold and pink. A new day, a new beginning. A family not born but built one choice at a time, one moment at a time, one act of love at a time. Sophie opened her notebook. Emma had thought to grab it, and began writing with her free hand while Grace nursed. "Dear Grace, you were born at 5:47 a.m. on February 14th, Valentine's Day, which is perfect because you are so loved. The first person to hold you after me was Jack, who saved us both on a snowy night. The first person to sing to you was Emma, who has been waiting for you since Christmas. The first sound you heard was my voice saying I love you, which I do more than all the stars you'll ever see. Welcome to the world, baby girl. Welcome to our family. Welcome home." The first weeks with Grace home were a blur of feedings and diapers. Cries in the night that had everyone stumbling through the hallways like sleepwalkers. Sophie moved through it all with a determination that impressed Jack, though he could see the exhaustion wearing on her dark circles under her eyes, growing deeper each day. "Let me take her tonight," Jack offered one evening when Grace was 3 weeks old, finding Sophie walking circles in the living room, the baby crying against her shoulder. "I've got it," Sophie insisted, but her voice cracked with fatigue. "Sophie, you haven't slept more than 2 hours straight since we came home. Give her to me." She hesitated, then carefully transferred Grace to his arms. The baby continued crying for a moment, then settled, perhaps recognizing the steady heartbeat of someone who'd walked this path before. "How do you do that?" Sophie asked, sinking into the couch. "Practice." Emma was colicky for 3 months. Sarah and I took shifts walking her around this same room. He adjusted Grace against his chest, began the familiar sway and bounce rhythm that seemed programmed into parental DNA. Go sleep. That's an order. Sophie didn't argue further, dragging herself upstairs. Jack walked Grace around the living room past the grandfather clock that chimed midnight, past the window where snow was falling again, lighter now as March approached. The baby's cries gradually softened to whimpers, then to small snuffling sounds against his flannel shirt. That's it, little one, he murmured. You're safe, you're loved, you're home. Emma appeared on the stairs in her penguin pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Is Grace okay? Just missing her mama. Why are you awake? Couldn't sleep. She came down curled up on the couch where Sophie had been. Dad, are we going to keep them forever? Jack continued his circuit of the room, considering his answer. I don't know about forever, but for as long as they need us. What if we need them too? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything Jack had told himself about temporary arrangements and helping out. Because the truth was, they did need Sophie and Grace. The house felt complete with them in it, like a clock with all its parts finally working in synchronization. Then I guess we'll figure it out together, he said finally. Emma seemed satisfied with this, watching him walk Grace until her eyes grew heavy. Dad, I'm glad you stopped that night. Me too, sweetheart. Mom would be glad too. Jack's throat tightened. Yeah, she would. By the time Grace finally settled into deep sleep, Emma had dozed off on the couch. Jack covered her with Sarah's quilt, then carried Grace upstairs to the nursery. Sophie was passed out in her bed, one arm flung over her eyes, still fully dressed. He laid Grace in her crib, watched her for a moment to make sure she stayed settled, then carefully pulled a blanket over Sophie. In the hallway between their rooms, Jack stood for a moment listening to the quiet sounds of his household sleeping. It felt right in a way things hadn't felt right in 2 years. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something new growing in the space grief had carved out. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Jack was in his workshop when he heard car doors slam multiple voices. Through the window, he saw not the Reeds' expensive sedan, but 2 younger people getting out of a beat-up Honda. Sophie's voice from the porch was shocked. Melissa, Tony. Jack came out to find Sophie being embraced by a young woman who looked enough like her to be a sister, while a lanky boy hung back, hands shoved in his pockets. Your parents have been telling everyone you lost your mind and ran away, Melissa was saying. But Mrs. Chen at the church told me where you really were. Sophie. Why didn't you call me? I thought you'd side with them. I'm your sister. I don't care what Mom and Dad say, you're my sister. The boy Tony apparently finally spoke. Is it true you had the baby? Yeah. Sophie's voice was defensive. Grace. Her name is Grace. Can we see her? Sophie looked at Jack, uncertain. He nodded. Bring them in. Emma's giving her a bottle in the kitchen. The kitchen was chaos within minutes. Melissa, who turned out to be Sophie's older sister by 2 years, immediately fell in love with Grace. Tony, 17 and clearly overwhelmed, stood awkwardly by the door until Emma took pity on him and started showing him her rock collection. She's beautiful, Melissa said, cradling Grace with practiced ease. She looks just like you did as a baby. You remember that? I remember everything, including how Mom and Dad acted when you told them you were pregnant. Melissa's face hardened. It was wrong, Sophie. What they did was wrong. They were protecting the family reputation. Bullshit. The word cracked like a whip. They were protecting themselves, their image. They're standing at the country club. Tony had moved closer, peering at Grace with curiosity. She's so small. All babies are small, dummy, Melissa said, but her tone was affectionate. I know that. I didn't think about Sophie being a mom. She's only a year older than me. Sophie reached out and took her brother's hand. I didn't think about it either until it happened. But Tony, she's not a mistake. She's not what Mom and Dad said she was. I know. His voice was quiet. I told them that. That's why they grounded me. You stood up to them. Someone had to. After you left, the house got really quiet, like scary quiet. Mom cries when she thinks no one's watching. Dad just works all the time. He shrugged, trying for casual and missing. It sucks. Melissa handed Grace back to Sophie. We can't stay long. If they find out we came here, They'll kick you out too. Maybe, probably. Melissa met Sophie's eyes. But you're my sister. Grace is my niece. That matters more than their approval. They stayed for 2 hours, Melissa catching Sophie up on family news, Tony playing some complicated card game with Emma that seemed to involve a lot of shouting. Jack made sandwiches, observing the siblings seeing the shapes of the family Sophie had lost. As they prepared to leave, Melissa pulled Jack aside. Thank you for taking care of her. She needed someone, and we failed her. She's taking care of herself. We're just providing space for her to do it. It's more than that. Melissa glanced at Sophie, who was showing Tony how to hold Grace. She's different, stronger. Before, with our parents, she was always trying to be perfect to earn their love. Here, she just is. She's remarkable, Jack said simply. Yeah, she always was. Parents just couldn't see it. After they left with promises to visit again and secret phone numbers exchanged, Sophie sat in the rocking chair with Grace, tears streaming down her face. They came, she kept saying. They actually came. Family shows up, Emma said matter-of-fact as always. The real kind, anyway. That evening, while Sophie nursed Grace and Emma did homework at the kitchen table, Jack's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Mr. Turner, this is Daniel Morrison from Morrison, Keller and Associates. Lawyers. Jack's stomach clenched. Yes. I'm representing William and Patricia Reed in the matter of their daughter Sophia Reed and their granddaughter. We need to discuss arrangements for the child. What kind of arrangements? My clients are prepared to offer a substantial sum for legal guardianship of the infant. They feel, given their daughter's age and circumstances, that this would be in everyone's best interest. Jack's hand tightened on the phone. They want to buy Grace. Sophie's head snapped up from across the room, eyes wide with panic. That's a crude way of putting it. They want to provide for their granddaughter's future. And Sophie would be free to pursue her education and life goals without the burden of single motherhood. I see. And what does Sophie think about this generous offer? We haven't approached Miss Reed directly. We thought it best to go through you as the current housing provider. Jack looked at Sophie, who was clutching Grace tight, shaking her head violently. Mr. Morrison, you can tell the Reeds that Grace is not for sale. Neither is Sophie's motherhood. If they want a relationship with their granddaughter, they can start by accepting their daughter. Good evening. He hung up before the lawyer could respond. They want to take her, Sophie whispered. They want to take my baby. They can't. You're her mother. You're an adult. They have no legal grounds. They have money, lawyers, connections. Jack crossed the room, knelt in front of the rocking chair. Sophie, look at me. They cannot take Grace. I won't let them. How can you stop them? Because I know every judge in this county. Because Sarah's uncle is the district attorney. Because this community protects its own, and you're one of ours now. He put his hand over hers where it rested on Grace's back. Because I will fight them with everything I have before I let them destroy what you've built here. Emma had abandoned her homework to stand beside Sophie's chair. Me too. I'll fight too. We all will, Jack said firmly. That night, Sophie wrote in her notebook for longer than usual. Jack could hear her pen scratching across paper until well past midnight. In the morning, he found her at the kitchen table, notebook closed in front of her. I've been thinking, she said, about the future. Jack poured coffee, waited. I can't live here forever. It's not fair to you and Emma. Sophie, let me finish. I need to go to school, get a degree, build something stable for Grace. But she looked up at him. I don't want to leave. This place, you and Emma, you're the only real family Grace and I have now. So don't leave. It's not that simple. Why not? Jack sat across from her. There's a community college in Montpelier, 30-minute drive. They have a nursing program. I looked it up. Sophie stared at him. You looked it up? Emma did, actually. She's convinced you should be a nurse because you're good at taking care of people. I can't afford financial aid, grants for single mothers, work-study programs. Sophie, if you want to go to school, we'll find a way. And Grace? We'll figure it out. Emma's in school most of the day. I work from home. Mrs. Thompson next door used to run a daycare, might be willing to watch Grace a few hours a day. He leaned forward. Stop looking for reasons it won't work and start looking for ways it will. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this, really? Jack thought about it, about the real answer beneath all the practical reasons. Because you belong here. Both of you. Because Emma needs you, and maybe I do too. Because Sarah would have loved you and would have already had your whole life planned out, probably with color-coded schedules and labeled folders. Sophie laughed through her tears. I found some of those folders. She was very organized. Desperately organized. It was adorable and terrifying. They sat quietly for a moment, Grace starting to fuss in her bouncy seat. Sophie picked her up, settled her for nursing. If I stayed, Sophie said carefully, it would change things, make them more permanent. People would talk. People already talk. Let them. Your in-laws. Love Emma and want her happy. She's happier than she's been since Sarah died. And you. Jack considered lying, keeping things safe and undefined. But Sophie deserved truth. I'm happier too. Not the same happy as before that's gone, but something new. Something I didn't think I'd feel again. Sophie studied his face. Okay. Okay, I'll stay. I'll apply to the community college. We'll figure it out. Emma, who'd obviously been listening from the stairs, let out a whoop and came running. Really? You're really staying? Really? Sophie confirmed, laughing, as Emma threw her arms around her, careful of Grace. This is the best day ever. We need to celebrate. Dad, can we make a cake? It's 7 a.m. So cake for breakfast. And somehow that's what they did. Made a lopsided chocolate cake at 7 a.m, ate it with milk while Grace watched from her bouncy seat with serious dark eyes. Emma got frosting on her nose. Sophie laughed until she couldn't breathe, and Jack felt something shift and settle in his chest like a clock finally finding its rhythm after being broken. 3 days later, the Reeds showed up again. This time, Jack was ready. William Reed stood on the porch with his lawyer Patricia behind them, looking pale and drawn. Sophie was upstairs with Grace, but Jack had called Sarah's uncle, District Attorney Tom Mitchell, who stood beside him. Mr. Reed, Tom said pleasantly, I hear you're trying to buy your granddaughter. William's face flushed. That's not, we're trying to ensure she has proper care. She has proper care. I've been out here myself, seen the setup. Sophie's doing a fine job. She's 18, and legally an adult, making her own decisions, raising her daughter with help from good people. Tom's voice hardened. Now you can either accept that and try to build a relationship with your daughter and granddaughter, or you can keep pushing this and find out just how unfriendly this county can be to outsiders who try to break up families. The lawyer whispered urgently to William, who looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. Patricia stepped forward suddenly. Can I see her, the baby? Everyone turned to look at her. Patricia, William started. I just want to see her, Patricia said, and for the first time she looked less like a perfect political wife and more like a grieving grandmother. Please. Jack looked up at the window where Sophie stood, watching Grace in her arms. She hesitated, then nodded. Come in, Jack said. Just you. Patricia followed him inside, William sputtering on the porch. Sophie came downstairs slowly, Grace awake and alert in her arms. Hi, Mom, Sophie said quietly. Patricia's composure crumbled entirely. Oh, Sophia, she's beautiful. Do you want to hold her? Patricia nodded, unable to speak. Sophie carefully transferred Grace, who looked up at her grandmother with those serious dark eyes. Her name is Grace, Sophie said. Grace Patricia. Patricia looked up sharply. You gave her my name. You're still my mother. That hasn't changed. Patricia sank into the couch, cradling Grace like she was made of spun glass. I've missed so much already. She's almost 6 weeks old, and I've missed everything. That was your choice, Sophie said, not unkindly but firmly. Your father made his position clear. What's yours? Mom. Patricia looked at Grace, then at Sophie. I want to know my granddaughter. She took a shaky breath. I want my daughter back. I never left. You pushed me away. I know. I was wrong. We were wrong. Patricia looked around the room, taking in the comfortable chaos of baby items mixed with clock parts and Emma's school projects. You've built a good life here. They're good people. Yes, I can see that. Patricia stood reluctantly, handing Grace back. Your father won't apologize. His pride won't let him, but I will. I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm so sorry. Sophie started crying, which made Grace start crying, which made Patricia start crying. Emma, who'd been hiding in the kitchen, came out with a box of tissues. Everybody's always crying since Grace came, she announced. Happy tears, sad tears, tired tears, so many tears. Patricia laughed shakily. You must be Emma. Yes, ma'am. Sophie's teaching me to knit. Want to see? And somehow Patricia Reed ended up sitting in Sarah's kitchen, admiring Emma's lumpy first attempt at a scarf, while Sophie made tea and Grace dozed in her bouncy seat. Jack and Tom dealt with William and the lawyer, sending them away with clear warnings about harassment and legal consequences. Patricia stayed for 2 hours. Before she left, she pressed an envelope into Sophie's hand. It's not much. Your father controls most of the money, but I've been saving. For you. For her. Sophie tried to give it back, but Patricia refused. Please, let me do something. Let me be something to her, even if it's just the grandmother who sends birthday cards and Christmas presents. You could be more than that. Your father doesn't have to know. I won't tell him if you visit. Emma won't either, will you, Em? Emma made a zipping motion across her lips. Patricia hugged Sophie carefully, as if afraid she might break. I'll come back. When I can. I promise. After she left, Sophie opened the envelope. Inside was $3,000 in cash and a note. For her future. All my love, Mom. Sophie showed it to Jack, who whistled low. That's not nothing. It's her whole savings. She must have been hiding this for months. Sophie fingered the bills. College fund, I guess. Good start to one. That night, as spring rain replaced winter snow beating gently on the roof, Jack found Sophie in Grace's nursery, rocking her daughter and humming softly. You okay? Yeah, just thinking. She looked up at him. My mom looked old today. Older than 2 months should have made her. Regret ages people. Do you think she meant it about coming back? I think she meant it in the moment. Whether she follows through, Jack shrugged. That's up to her. I used to dream about them accepting Grace, accepting me. Now I realize I don't need their acceptance. I have this. She gestured to the room, the house beyond it. I have everything I need. Sophie, I know what you're going to say, that this is temporary, that I need to build my own life. But Jack, what if this is my life? What if this is what I'm building? Jack didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but wasn't ready to voice it. The shape of it sat between them unspoken, but understood. Over the next week, spring arrived, properly melting the last stubborn snow and coaxing green from the dormant earth. Sophie applied to the community college nursing program for fall admission. Emma taught Grace to smile, spending hours making faces until the baby's mouth curved in unmistakable joy. Jack fixed clocks and watched his makeshift family flourish, feeling like he was coming back to life, along with the garden Sophie had started in the backyard. Patricia visited twice more always when William was traveling for business. She brought baby clothes and toys, held Grace for hours, and slowly, carefully rebuilt a bridge to her daughter. The second visit, she brought Melissa and the sisters, spent the afternoon in the garden while Patricia and Emma baked cookies. This is weird, Emma said carefully, measuring flour. Good, weird, but weird. Most good things are weird at first, Patricia replied, showing Emma how to cream butter and sugar properly. Tony came on his own once, driving his battered Honda, looking older than his 17 years. He held Grace awkwardly, but with determination, letting her grab his finger with her tiny fist. She's strong, he said, surprised. Like her mama, Sophie replied. Sophie, I'm sorry. About Mom and Dad. About not standing up for you sooner. You were 16. What could you have done? Something, anything, more than I did. Sophie hugged her brother carefully, Grace between them. You're here now. That's what matters. By May, Grace was sleeping through the night mostly. Sophie had been accepted to the nursing program with a partial scholarship. Emma had won the school science fair with a project about clock mechanisms that Jack had helped her build. Life had developed a rhythm, a pattern, a comfortable predictability that Jack had thought was gone forever, which is why he should have known something would disrupt it. The disruption came in the form of a man standing on their porch on a Tuesday evening, young and athletic with the kind of good looks that belonged on college recruitment posters. "Can I help you?" Jack asked, not opening the screen door. "I'm looking for Sophie. Sophie Reed. And you are Ryan Chen. I'm Grace's father." Jack felt the world tilt slightly. Through the house, he could hear Sophie laughing at something Emma had said, the sound of Grace babbling in her high chair. "She doesn't want to see you." "You don't know that. You haven't asked her." "I know you signed away your rights. Your parents paid lawyers to make sure you had no obligations." Ryan's face flushed. "That was my parents, not me. I was 17, I didn't know." "You knew enough to let her face this alone." "Please, I just want to see her, to explain." Jack wanted to send him away to protect the peace they'd built, but it wasn't his choice to make. "Wait here." He found Sophie in the kitchen, Grace in her arms, applesauce in both their hair. "Sophie, Ryan Chen is on the porch." The color drained from her face. "Ryan, he's here." "I can send him away." Sophie stood slowly, handed Grace to Emma. "No, I need to do this." She walked to the front door like she was walking to an execution. Jack stayed close, ready to intervene if needed. Ryan stood when he saw her, his eyes going immediately to her no longer pregnant body. "Sophie, you look good. What do you want Ryan to apologize, to explain?" He shifted nervously. "To see her, the baby. Grace, her name is Grace." "Grace." He tested the name. "Can I see her Why, your parents made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with her." "My parents were wrong. I was wrong. Sophie, I was scared. 17 and headed to Syracuse on a full ride. My parents said they'd disown me if I acknowledged the baby. But I've been thinking about her, about you, every day." Sophie studied him for a long moment. "You're still at Syracuse?" "Yeah, sophomore year, running track." He paused. "I told my girlfriend about Grace. She said I needed to make things right." "Girlfriend," Sophie said flatly. "It's not like that. You and I, we weren't together even before you got me pregnant and abandoned me." Ryan flinched. "I deserve that." "You deserve worse." They stood in awkward silence. Then Grace's babbling carried from the kitchen, followed by Emma's laugh. "She sounds happy," Ryan said softly. "She is happy. We're happy. Sophie gestured to the house behind her. "My family." Ryan looked at Jack for the first time, really looked. "You're not—" "I'm a friend," Jack said. "Someone who gives a damn what happens to them." "Can I just see her? Once I won't ask for anything else." Sophie looked back at Jack, who shrugged. Her choice. "Once," she said. 5 minutes. She led Ryan to the kitchen where Emma was attempting to feed Grace more food, ending up on the floor than in the baby's mouth. "Grace," Sophie said softly, "there's someone here to see you." Ryan stopped in the doorway, staring at his daughter. Grace looked back at him with her serious dark eyes, his eyes, Jack realized. The resemblance was unmistakable. "She's perfect," Ryan whispered. "Yes, she is. She has my mom's eyes, my grandmother's. The ones your parents paid lawyers to make sure she'd never legally have." Ryan closed his eyes. "Sophie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't change anything." "I know." He opened his eyes, looked at Grace again, then at Sophie. "I won't contest the adoption." "What adoption?" "When you get married, your boyfriend." He gestured at Jack. "When he adopts her. I won't fight it." Sophie laughed, sharp and bitter. "Jack's not my boyfriend. He's the man who found me freezing to death on the side of the road when I was 7 months pregnant. He took me in when my parents kicked me out and yours threatened me with lawyers." Ryan's face went white. "Your parents kicked you out. What did you think would happen, that they'd be thrilled their 18-year-old daughter was pregnant?" "I didn't think—" "No, you didn't. You didn't think about me at all." Emma had been watching this exchange with sharp eyes. Now she stood lifting Grace from her high chair. "You should go," Emma said to Ryan. "You're upsetting Sophie." I'm not. Ryan started, then stopped. A 12-year-old was protecting Sophie from him. The shame on his face was complete. Yeah, I should go. He pulled out his wallet, extracted several bills. For her, for Grace. Sophie didn't take it. We don't need your money. Please, it's not much, but we don't need your money. Each word was carved from ice. Ryan put the money away slowly. Would it be okay if I sent things sometimes? Not to see her, just birthday presents. Christmas. Sophie looked at Grace, who was playing with Emma's necklace, oblivious to the drama around her. I'll think about it. Ryan nodded, defeated. I really am sorry, Sophie, for all of it. He left quickly, almost running to his car. Sophie sank into a chair, shaking. You okay? Jack asked. I don't know. I thought I'd feel angry. I do feel angry, but also, she trailed off. Sad, relieved. He's not going to fight for her. He's not going to disrupt her life. She reached for Grace, who went to her happily babbling, Mama, mama. She's mine. Just mine. Ours, Emma corrected. She's ours. Sophie smiled shakily. Yeah, ours. That night, after everyone was asleep, Jack stood in his workshop, unable to focus on the mantel clock that needed repair. He kept thinking about Ryan's assumption that he and Sophie were together, that he would adopt Grace. The idea should have been ridiculous. He was 25 years older than Sophie, for God's sake. Old enough to be her father. But the way they lived, the way they moved around each other, the way they were raising the girls together, it did look like a family. It felt like a family. He picked up the wooden bird he'd carved for Grace's mobile, turned it over in his hands. Such a small thing, but it connected them. All the small things did. The way Sophie knew how he took his coffee. The way he knew she wrote in her notebook when she couldn't sleep. The way Emma looked to both of them for permission comfort answers. The way Grace lit up when any of them entered a room. Not a romance maybe, but something. Something important. Something worth protecting. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Sophie stood in the doorway in one of Sarah's old robes, notebook in hand. Couldn't sleep. Grace is actually sleeping for once. My mind won't stop. About Ryan. About everything. She came into the workshop, touched the clocks lining the shelves. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night? Don't. Don't what? Don't go down that road. It leads nowhere good. But you're here. Grace is here. That's what matters. Sophie picked up one of his tools, a tiny screwdriver. Ryan thought we were together. I know. Everyone probably thinks that. Probably. Doesn't it bother you? Jack considered his words carefully. What bothers me is the idea of you leaving because you're worried about what people think. I'm not leaving. Good. They stood quietly, surrounded by the ticking of multiple clocks, none quite in sync. I've been writing Grace about today, Sophie said finally. About meeting her biological father. I want her to know he came, that he saw her and thought she was perfect. That's generous of you. It's not for him, it's for her. Someday she'll ask, and I want to have answers that don't make her feel unwanted. She'll never feel unwanted. Not with you as her mother. Sophie's eyes filled. Do you really think I'm a good mother? I think you're an extraordinary mother. I watch you with her Sophie. The patience, the love, the way you put her needs before everything else. That's what good mothers do. I learned from Sarah. You never met Sarah. No, but I live in her house. I see her organization systems, her note-taking, her careful plans. I see how she raised Emma confident and kind and brave. I see how she loved you in all the pictures, all the little touches throughout this place. Sophie met his eyes. I learned from her ghost. Jack's throat was too tight to speak. Sophie stepped closer, rose on her toes, and kissed his cheek softly. Thank you, she whispered, for stopping, for everything. Then she was gone, leaving Jack alone with his clocks and his thoughts, and the lingering warmth of her lips on his cheek. Summer arrived with a vengeance that year, turning Vermont into a green paradise that made everyone forget the brutal winter. Sophie started her classes at the community college in June, taking 2 summer courses to get a head start. Every morning, she'd kiss Grace goodbye, leave detailed instructions for Jack that he didn't need, but pretended to study and drive off in the used Honda Civic they'd found for her. Patricia had contributed another $1,000, slipping it to Sophie during one of her secret visits. "You sure you're okay with this?" Sophie asked for the 100th time that first morning. Grace balanced on her hip while Jack packed the diaper bag. "Sophie, I raised Emma through the baby years. I can handle Grace for a few hours. But your work can be done during her naps. Go. Learn. Become the nurse you're meant to be." She'd hugged him then, quick and fierce, before running to her car. Jack stood on the porch with Grace watching the dust trail disappear down the road. The baby grabbed his nose, babbling something that sounded almost like words. "Just you and me today, little bird," he said, using the nickname that had stuck since he'd carved her mobile. "Let's try not to burn the house down." The first week was an adjustment. Grace, now 5 months old, had decided that rolling was her new favorite activity. Jack would set her on her playmat, turn to adjust a clock mechanism, and find her 3 feet away gumming the leg of a chair. Emma helped in the afternoons, reading to Grace with dramatic voices that made the baby shriek with laughter. "She's going to be smart," Emma declared, watching Grace grab for the book. "Look, she already wants to turn the pages. She wants to eat the pages." Same difference. It was during the second week that Mrs. Thompson from next door stopped by, ostensibly to borrow sugar, but really to snoop. Jack knew the whole town was talking about their unconventional arrangement. "So the girl is in school now?" Mrs. Thompson asked, peering at Grace in her bouncy seat. "Sophie. Her name is Sophie, and yes, she's taking classes. And you're babysitting." "I'm helping. We're a household. We help each other." Mrs. Thompson's eyes narrowed with the kind of interest that meant this would be all over town by dinner. Sarah would find this all very interesting. Jack's jaw clenched. Sarah would have been the first to offer help. "Oh, I'm not criticizing, dear, just observing. The baby does look happy, and Emma seems to have taken to being a big sister." After she left, Jack sat with Grace on the porch, watching the summer clouds build over the mountains. "People are going to talk, little bird. About your mama, about me, about all of us. But you know what? Let them. We know who we are." Grace blew a spit bubble in response, which he took as agreement. Sophie came home that afternoon exhausted but exhilarated, full of stories about her anatomy professor and the other students, many of them also non-traditional, also fighting for second chances. "There's this woman, Maria, she's 42 with 3 kids. She said if she can do it, anyone can. And this guy, James, he was in the military using his GI benefits. Everyone has a story, Jack. Everyone's trying to rebuild something." She scooped Grace up, covering her with kisses while the baby squealed in delight. "Were you good for Jack?" "Of course you were. You're always good." "She tried to eat a clock gear," Emma reported from the kitchen. "Dad caught her just in time. She didn't, Grace." Sophie looked at Jack in alarm. "She didn't actually eat it, just gummed it a little. It's been thoroughly sanitized." Sophie shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're going to give me gray hair, little bird." The nickname in Sophie's mouth made something warm bloom in Jack's chest. Their little bird, their shared vocabulary expanding every day. July brought the town's annual Founders' Day festival, complete with parade craft booths and fireworks. Jack hadn't gone since Sarah died, but Emma begged, and Sophie's eyes lit up at the idea of Grace's first fireworks. She might sleep through them, Jack warned, but he was already planning their day. They went early to get good seats for the parade, spreading Sarah's old quilt on the grass in the park. Grace, dressed in a tiny sundress Patricia had sent, sat in Sophie's lap, wide-eyed at all the activity. Emma wore her hair in the French braid Sophie had taught her, looking older and happier than Jack had seen her in years. "Turner?" "Jack Turner." Jack turned to find Tom Mitchell approaching with his wife Linda, both beaming. "Tom, Linda, you remember Sophie and Grace?" "Of course. How are the classes going, dear?" Linda asked Sophie. "Wonderful, exhausting, but wonderful." "And this little angel?" Linda reached for Grace, who went willingly always social. "She's getting so big." They chatted easily, other families stopping to say hello to coo over Grace to ask Sophie about school. Jack noticed the way Sophie gradually relaxed, realizing she was being accepted not as a scandal, but as a neighbor. The parade was typical small-town Vermont fire trucks, the high school marching band, local businesses with makeshift floats. Grace was entranced by the colors and sounds, only fussing when a fire truck's horn was too loud. Emma caught candy thrown from the floats, carefully selecting the best pieces to save for later. "This is perfect," Sophie said quietly to Jack as the parade wound down. "I never had this growing up. Everything was always so formal, so structured. This is chaotic. Real. This is real." As the sun set and the fireworks began, Grace fell asleep in Jack's arms, somehow sleeping through the booming display. Sophie and Emma oohed and awed at the colors painting the night sky. At one point, Sophie's hand found Jack's in the darkness, squeezing gently during the finale. "Thank you," she whispered, "for making us part of this." "You were already part of it," he whispered back. "You just needed to see it." The drive home was quiet, both girls dozing in the back seat, Grace secure in her car seat between them. Jack drove slowly, not wanting the evening to end, knowing something had shifted. They weren't playing at being a family anymore. They were one. August brought a heat wave that had everyone seeking shade and water. Jack set up a kiddie pool in the backyard where Grace could splash while Sophie studied and Emma practiced her diving rolls that mostly resulted in belly flops. It was during one of these lazy afternoons that Sophie got the call that changed everything. She was reviewing notes for an upcoming exam. Grace napping in her portable crib under the big oak tree when her phone rang. Jack watched her face go white as she listened. Yes, I understand. Okay, thank you for calling." She hung up, stared at the phone like it might bite her. "Sophie, what is it?" "That was Melissa. Dad had a heart attack. He's in surgery." Jack moved to her immediately. "How bad?" "Bad, really bad. They don't know if—" She stopped, tears starting to fall. "I should hate him. He threw me out, but he's still my father. You should go." "What?" "To the hospital. You should go." "Jack, he doesn't want me there." "But you need to be there. For you, not for him." Sophie looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully. "I can't take her there, into that." "I'll keep her. Emma can help." "Go, Sophie." She stood uncertainly. "Are you sure?" "Go, take my truck. It's more reliable than your car for the distance." Sophie kissed Grace's sleeping head, hugged Emma, then surprised Jack by throwing her arms around him. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered against his chest. "You won't have to find out. Now go." She drove away in his truck and Jack settled in for what he knew would be a long wait. Grace woke an hour later, fussing for her mother. Jack walked her around the house, showing her the clocks, telling her stories about each one. Emma helped by singing every Disney song she knew, which was considerable. "Is Sophie's dad going to die?" Emma asked that evening as they ate dinner, Grace in her high chair throwing more peas than she ate. "I don't know, sweetheart. If he dies, will Sophie be sad?" "Probably. Relationships are complicated. You can be angry with someone and still love them." Emma considered this. "Like how I was mad at Mom for dying but still loved her." Jack's heart clenched. "Yeah, Em. Exactly like that." Sophie called around 10 that night. "He made it through surgery. Triple bypass. He's in the ICU." "That's good. How are you?" "I don't know. Mom fell apart when she saw me. Melissa and Tony are here. We're all just waiting." "Did you see him?" "No. Mom went in. Only one at a time. She said he asked for me, but I think she was lying to make me feel better." "Maybe not. Maybe." She sighed. "I should come home. Grace is fine. She's asleep. We've got her. Stay as long as you need." There was a long pause. "Home. I said I should come home." "Yeah, you did." "That's what it is now, isn't it? Home." "Yeah, Sophie. It's home." She came back 2 days later exhausted and emotionally drained. Her father was stable but facing a long recovery. He'd been awake when she finally saw him, had looked at her for a long moment before saying, "You look like your mother at that age." "That's all?" Jack asked as Sophie recounted the visit. "That's all. But Mom said it's the first thing he said about me without anger since I left." "Maybe it's a start." "Maybe. Grace nearly turned herself inside out with joy when Sophie walked through the door, reaching desperately for her mother while babbling "Mama, mama, ma" at top volume. "I missed you too, little bird," Sophie murmured, breathing in Grace's baby scent. "I missed you so much." The rest of August passed in a blur of Sophie's classes, Grace learning to sit up on her own, and Emma preparing for 7th grade with a mix of excitement and dread. Jack found a rhythm to their days that felt sustainable, like something that could last. September arrived with cool mornings and the first hints of color in the leaves. Sophie had aced her summer courses and was starting full-time in the nursing program. The schedule was demanding classes 3 days a week, clinical rotations starting next semester. "I'm going to be gone so much," she worried, watching Grace play with blocks on the living room floor. "We'll manage," Jack assured her. "Mrs. Thompson offered to help when I have clock deliveries. Emma's in school most of the day anyway." "But," Sophie, stop looking for problems. "You're doing this for Grace, for your future. We all understand that." What he didn't say was that he was already dreading the day she wouldn't need them anymore, when her degree would give her options beyond a cabin in Vermont with a broken clockmaker and his daughter. It was Emma who brought up what Jack had been avoiding. "Dad, are you in love with Sophie?" They were working on Emma's science project, something about photosynthesis that required far too many bean plants. Jack nearly dropped the pot he was holding. "What, Em, no. Sophie, she's family, but not like that." Emma gave him a look that was pure Sarah skeptical and knowing. "Dad, you smile different when she's around." "I smile the same." "No, you don't. You smile real smiles now, not the fake ones you did after Mom died." Jack set down the pot, sat beside his too perceptive daughter. Sophie's 19 years old. So I'm 44, I'm old enough to be her father." "But you're not her father. You're Jack." "It's not appropriate. She's in a vulnerable position living here depending on us. She's not dependent. She pays for groceries, she cooks, she helps with everything. That's not dependent, that's partnership." When had his 12-year-old become so wise? Even if there were feelings, which there aren't, it wouldn't be fair to her. She deserves someone her own age, someone who can give her a full life. Like Ryan. That worked out great. Emma. "Dad, I'm not saying you should marry her tomorrow. I'm just saying, maybe stop deciding what she deserves and ask her what she wants." Before Jack could respond, Sophie and Grace came in from their walk, both pink-cheeked from the cool air. Grace reached for Jack immediately, and he took her, feeling her solid weight, her trust. "Bean plants," Sophie said, seeing their project. "I did this same experiment in high school, made my parents keep 30 plants in the kitchen window." She helped Emma label the containers, talking about variables and controls, and Jack watched them, his daughter and this young woman who'd become so essential to their lives. Emma caught his eye and mouthed, "See," before turning back to Sophie with a question about photosynthesis rates. That night, unable to sleep, Jack found himself in Sarah's craft room. Sophie's room now, though Sarah's presence lingered. Sophie had integrated herself carefully, respectfully, her few possessions mixed with Sarah's abandoned projects. On the dresser sat a photo Emma had taken of all 4 of them at the Founders' Day festival, faces bright with laughter and firelight. "What would you tell me to do, Sarah?" he whispered to the empty room. "Would you tell me I'm being foolish, that I'm too old, too damaged, or would you tell me to stop overthinking and just be happy?" No answer came. But through the wall, he could hear Sophie singing softly to Grace, the same lullaby she'd sung that first night. The sound was answer enough. Life was happening whether he was ready or not. October painted Vermont in glory, the mountains becoming a patchwork of gold and crimson. Sophie was deep in her studies, the dining table permanently covered in textbooks and notes. Grace had started crawling a development that turned the house into an obstacle course of baby gates and relocated breakables. "She's like a tiny tornado," Emma complained, finding Grace once again heading for her rock collection. A very cute tornado, but still. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything shifted again. Jack was in his workshop, Emma at school, Grace napping, and Sophie supposedly in class. But he heard her car pull up too early, and something in the way she slammed the door made him set down his tools. He found her in the kitchen crying silently over a cup of tea she hadn't touched. "Sophie, what happened?" She looked up, eyes red and swollen. I failed my anatomy exam, failed it completely. 38%. Oh, Sophie. I studied so hard, Jack. So hard. But I couldn't remember anything. I sat there looking at the questions, and it was like I'd never seen any of it before. She put her head in her hands. I'm not smart enough for this. Jack sat beside her, fought the urge to pull her into his arms. You're exhausted. When's the last time you got a full night's sleep? Grace has been teething. I know, but Sophie, you can't do everything. Study all night, care for Grace, help with the house. Something has to give. But I have to do it all. That's what being a mother means. No, that's what being alone means. You're not alone. She looked at him, then really looked, and something in her expression made Jack's heart race. I'm not alone, she repeated softly. No, you have us. You have me. The words carried more weight than he'd intended, but he didn't take them back. Sophie reached out, took his hand. I know. God, Jack, I know. You've been... She stopped searching for words. You've been everything. Father figure, friend, co-parent to Grace. Everything. The word father figure stung more than it should have. Is that how she saw him? You can retake the exam, he said, changing the subject. Talk to your professor, explain about being a single mother. They'll understand. Maybe. She squeezed his hand before letting go. I just feel so stupid. Everyone else seems to get it so easily. Everyone else doesn't have a baby. You're doing something extraordinary, Sophie. Cut yourself some slack. Grace woke, then, her cry cutting through the moment. Sophie stood to get her, but Jack was already moving. I'll get her. You review your notes. We'll figure out what went wrong. He brought Grace down, the baby immediately reaching for her mother. But instead of taking her, Sophie said, sit with us while I study both of you. So Jack sat with Grace on his lap, while Sophie spread out her anatomy textbook. He found himself genuinely interested as she explained what she was learning, and Grace seemed content to bang blocks together while they talked. When Emma came home from school, she joined them, asking questions that helped Sophie clarify concepts she'd been struggling with. You're not stupid, Emma declared after Sophie correctly identified all the bones in the skeletal system. You just need better study methods. Mom used to make up songs to remember things. Maybe that would help. They spent the evening creating ridiculous songs about anatomy, Emma and Jack coming up with increasingly absurd rhymes, while Sophie laughed until she cried for a different reason. Grace contributed by clapping offbeat and shrieking with joy. The femur is your thigh bone, the longest one you own, Emma sang to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The patella is your kneecap. It helps your joint to snap, Jack added, making Emma giggle. You're all insane, Sophie said, but she was smiling, and when she took her makeup exam the following week, she got an 82. Halloween came with its first real cold snap frost, silvering the grass in the mornings. Emma insisted on a group costume. They went as a clock. Jack Mother Time, Sophie, Baby New Year Grace, and a cuckoo bird. Emma. It was ridiculous and perfect, and when they won the contest at the community center, Emma's joy was infectious. We're the best family, she shouted, trophy held high. Sophie caught Jack's eye over Emma's head, and he saw his own thought reflected there. When had they become a family in Emma's mind? When had the pretense fallen away? November brought the first snow and Sophie's first clinical rotation at the local hospital. She was terrified the night before, trying on her scrubs multiple times, practicing taking blood pressure on Jack until his arm was sore. You're going to be wonderful, he told her, catching her hands to still them. You have the most important quality for a nurse, which is, you give a damn about everyone. That matters more than perfect technique. She stared at him for a long moment, and Jack thought she might say something important, something that would change everything. But Grace started crying upstairs, and the moment passed. Her clinical instructor turned out to be Mrs. Chen from the church, the one who'd helped Sophie when she first arrived. Small world, Mrs. Chen said, smiling. I had a feeling I'd see you in this program. You did. Oh yes, you have the look. The ones who've been broken and put themselves back together, they make the best nurses. Sophie thrived in the clinical setting, coming home with stories of patients and procedures, eyes bright with purpose. Jack loved watching her find herself, even as he worried about what would happen when she no longer needed the safety of their home. It was the week before Thanksgiving when Patricia called Sophie in tears. Your father's had a setback, another heart attack. Smaller, but Sophie, he's asking for you. This time, Sophie didn't hesitate. We'll all come. Also, my family, Jack, Emma, Grace, will all come. The drive to Woodstock was quiet. Grace fussing in her car seat. Emma reading in the back, Sophie rigid with tension beside Jack. It'll be okay, Jack said quietly. You don't know my father. No, but I know you. You're strong enough for this. William Reed looked small in the hospital bed, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with his illness and everything to do with choices and regret. His eyes found Sophie immediately, then moved to the baby in her arms. Is that her? This is Grace, your granddaughter. William's eyes filled with tears, shocking everyone. She looks like you did. Dad, I was wrong. The words came out strangled, forced through pride, thick as molasses. I was wrong, Sophia, about all of it. Sophie sank into the chair beside his bed, Grace on her lap. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I've been lying here thinking about dying, about what I'd leave behind, and all I could think was that I threw away my daughter for what? For reputation, for what people would think. He reached out a shaking hand toward Grace. Can I? Sophie hesitated, then placed Grace's tiny hand in her grandfather's. I'm sorry, William whispered. I'm so sorry. The rest of the visit was quiet, careful, everyone navigating the new territory of possible reconciliation. Patricia clung to Sophie and Grace like they might disappear. Melissa and Tony were there too, and suddenly the small hospital room was full of family reconnecting. Emma, meanwhile, had found the pediatric ward and was reading to sick children because of course she was. Jack found her there an hour later, surrounded by kids doing voices for the Gruffalo. Your daughter's amazing, a nurse told him. She just walked in and asked if anyone needed a story. She gets that from her mother, Jack said automatically, then realized he'd been thinking of Sophie, not Sarah. They stayed in a motel that night, 2 rooms side by side. After Emma and Grace were asleep, Sophie knocked softly on Jack's door. Can't sleep. Too much in my head. She sat on the uncomfortable motel chair. He apologized. My father actually apologized. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Relieved, angry that it took him almost dying, sad about all the time we lost. She pulled her knees up to her chest. Jack, what if they want us to move back? What if they want to be part of Grace's life now? What do you want? I want to stay in Vermont. I want to finish school. I want... She stopped, looked away. What? I want the life we have. Is that wrong? To choose the family we built over the one I was born into? Jack moved to sit beside her on the floor, their backs against the bed. It's not wrong. Family is more than blood. Sarah used to say that, didn't she? Emma mentioned it. All the time. She believed in chosen family and making room for people who needed it. He paused. She would have loved you, Sophie. Both of you. Sophie leaned her head against his shoulder. I wish I could have met her. You did in a way. Every time you use her recipe cards or sit in her rocking chair or love Emma the way you do, you're honoring her memory. They sat in comfortable silence, the sound of traffic outside, mixing with Grace's soft snoring from the porta-crib. Jack? Yeah. What are we? The question hung in the air, dangerous and necessary. What do you want us to be? Sophie lifted her head, turned to look at him. In the dim light from the parking lot, her eyes were very dark, very serious. I want us to be real. Not just circumstances, not just convenience. Real. Jack's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Sophie, I'm too old, yet. You're not. I'm 25 years older than you. So you deserve someone who can give you everything, adventure, travel, a long life together. I don't want adventure. I had adventure, it left me pregnant and alone on a highway. I want stability. I want someone who shows up. She reached out, touched his face gently. I want someone who stops for strangers in snowstorms. Sophie, I'm not asking for declarations or promises. I'm just asking, Can we stop pretending this is temporary? Can we just be what we are? Which is a family, a real family, however that looks, whatever that means. Jack caught her hand, held it against his cheek for a moment before lowering it, keeping it clasped in his. Okay. Okay. Okay, we're a family. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Sophie smiled, the kind of smile that transformed her whole face. Okay. They drove back to Vermont the next day, William's stable and improving bridges tentatively rebuilt. The mountains welcomed them home with fresh snow and brilliant sunshine, the kind of day that made everything seem possible. That evening, as they decorated for Thanksgiving, Emma looked at the four of them reflected in the window against the early dark and said, "This is going to be the best Thanksgiving ever." "Why's that?" Jack asked, lifting her so she could place the turkey decoration on top of the bookshelf. "Because everyone's here. Everyone who matters." Sophie caught Jack's eye and smiled that same transformative smile from the motel room. And Jack realized Emma was right. Everyone who mattered was here in this cabin that had seen so much loss and was now witnessing so much life. Grace babbled from her high chair, waving a wooden spoon like a conductor's baton. Sophie laughed and gave her a pot to bang. Emma started singing one of their anatomy songs badly off-key. Jack stood in the middle of his kitchen, surrounded by noise and chaos and love, and thought about time, how it wasn't a line, but a circle, always bringing you back to what mattered if you were brave enough to stop and notice. "Jack," Sophie said, bringing him back to the present. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said, looking at his family, however unconventional, however unexpected. "I'm perfect." Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and bright, the kind of day that made the snow sparkle like scattered diamonds. Sophie was up before anyone else, as had become her habit, but this time Jack found her in the kitchen, surrounded by Sarah's recipe cards, looking overwhelmed. "The turkey's too big, or the oven's too small, or I'm too incompetent to figure out basic geometry," she said without looking up. "You're attempting Sarah's famous herb-crusted turkey?" Emma asked. "She said it was tradition, and I thought I wanted to try." Sophie's voice cracked slightly. "But I don't want to ruin her memory by destroying her recipe." Jack moved beside her, looked at the recipe card with Sarah's precise handwriting. She always complained about that turkey. Every year she'd swear she was going to make something simpler, and every year she'd make it anyway because Emma loved it. "I don't want to disappoint Emma." "You couldn't disappoint Emma if you tried." Jack picked up the card, studied it. "But this is a two-person job. Sarah always made me help, usually while complaining about my knife skills." They worked together in the pre-dawn quiet, Sophie following Sarah's instructions while Jack shared memories of past Thanksgivings. Grace woke around 6 and Jack brought her down in her sleep sack, settling her in her high chair with some crackers while they cooked. "Sarah used to say the secret was in the compound butter," Jack said, watching Sophie work herbs into soft butter with focused determination. "But really the secret was that she made everything with love." Sophie's hands stilled. "Do you think she would mind me using her recipes being in her kitchen?" "I think she would be grateful that someone was taking care of her family." Emma appeared as the sun was fully up, drawn by the smells. "It smells right," she said wonderingly, "like before." "Sophie's following Mom's recipe exactly," Jack told her. "Not exactly," Sophie admitted. "I added a little rosemary. My grandmother always said rosemary was for remembrance." Emma hugged Sophie tight around the waist. "Mom would like that." By noon, the house was full. Tom and Linda Mitchell arrived with pies. Mrs. Thompson from next door brought her famous green beans, and surprisingly, Patricia Reed appeared at the door with Melissa and Tony. "Mom," Sophie stood frozen in the doorway. "How did you—" "Your father insisted. He's doing better, and he wanted—" Patricia held out a covered dish with shaking hands. "I brought sweet potatoes, the ones you used to love." Sophie took the dish, tears in her eyes. "Come in. Please, all of you come in." The table extended with every leaf Jack could find barely held everyone. Grace sat in her high chair between Sophie and Jack, babbling commentary that everyone pretended to understand. Emma had made place cards with everyone's names in glitter, including one that said Grandma Patricia, that made the older woman cry. "Before we eat," Jack said, standing with his water glass, I want to say something. This year, I'm thankful for unexpected gifts, for the storm that brought Sophie to us, for Grace, who reminded us all that life keeps moving forward, for family both born and chosen. He looked at Sophie. And for second chances. To second chances, Wam, everyone echoed. And if Patricia Reed cried a little more, everyone pretended not to notice. The meal was chaotic and perfect. The turkey was slightly dry, but nobody cared. Tony and Emma got into an argument about whether stuffing or mashed potatoes were superior. Grace managed to get sweet potato in her hair ears and somehow on Jack's shoulder. Melissa told embarrassing stories about Sophie as a child that had everyone laughing. She used to bandage all her stuffed animals, Melissa said. Said she was practicing for when she became a doctor. Nurse? Sophie corrected, blushing. Same caring heart, Patricia said softly. You always wanted to help everyone. After dinner, while the others dozed in the living room watching football, Sophie and Jack cleaned up together, moving around each other with practiced ease. Thank you, Sophie said quietly, for letting my family come. They're your family. Of course they're welcome. It's complicated, though, after everything. Jack dried the plate she handed him. Most families are complicated. That's what makes them family. Patricia appeared in the doorway. Could I help? Sophie nodded, handed her mother a dish towel. They worked in careful harmony 3 generations, if you counted Grace playing with measuring cups on the floor. Patricia talked about William's recovery, his new diet restrictions, the way he'd started looking at photo albums he hadn't touched in years. He found your baby pictures, Patricia told Sophie. Spent hours going through them. He cried Sophia. Your father actually cried. People change, Jack said carefully. Sometimes crisis shows us what really matters. Patricia looked at him thoughtfully. Yes, sometimes it takes almost losing everything to realize what you had. That evening, after Patricia and her children had left with promises to visit again soon after Mrs. Thompson had extracted promises for the sweet potato recipe, after the Mitchells had insisted on leaving enough pie for a week's worth of breakfasts, Jack found Sophie on the porch despite the cold Grace bundled against her chest in a carrier. Needed air? He asked, settling beside her on the swing. Needed quiet. Today was wonderful, but overwhelming. Yeah. She adjusted Grace's hat, the baby nearly asleep from the gentle swinging motion. My mother apologized. Really apologized, not just for Dad, but for herself. Said she chose being a politician's wife over being a mother. That must have been hard to hear. And hard to forgive. But I look at Grace and think, I'd forgive anyone anything if it meant she'd never doubt my love for her. They swung gently, the chains creaking in a rhythm that matched the sleeping baby's breathing. Jack, that toast you made about second chances, did you mean about us? Jack considered his words carefully. I meant about all of it. You and Grace coming here. Your family finding their way back. Emma learning to be happy again. Me learning that life doesn't end with loss. Sophie turned to look at him in the porch light. And us specifically. What do you want me to say, Sophie? The truth. The truth is that I'm terrified. You're so young with your whole life ahead of you. In 2 years, you'll have your degree, you'll have options, you could go anywhere, do anything. And I'm a middle-aged clockmaker with a daughter and more baggage than an airport. Sophie laughed softly. You're also the man who saved my life, who gave Grace a home before she was even born, who makes me feel safe and valued and seen. She shifted closer to him on the swing. Age is just numbers, Jack. Time. And you taught me that time isn't linear. Sophie, I'm not asking you to marry me or make any grand declarations. I'm just saying, stop pushing me away because you think it's what's best for me. Let me decide what's best for me. Before Jack could respond, Emma's voice called from inside. Dad, Sophie Grace is going to miss the lighting of the tree in town if we don't leave now. The moment broken, they gathered themselves for another tradition. The town tree lighting was magical. The whole community gathered in the square. Grace's eyes went wide at the lights, and she reached for them with chubby fingers babbling excitedly. Emma found her school friends and ran off to play checking back periodically like a mother hen. She's growing up. Sophie observed, watching Emma organize some kind of game with the younger kids. Too fast, Jack agreed. Seems like yesterday she was Grace's age. Time, Sophie said with a smile, never does what we want it to. The tree lit up suddenly, hundreds of lights blazing to life, and the crowd gasped collectively. Grace shrieked with joy, and Sophie lifted her higher to see better. Standing there in the crowd, surrounded by neighbors and friends holding the baby, while Sophie laughed at her reaction, Jack felt something settle in his chest. This was his family. However unconventional, however unexpected, this was his family. December arrived with a vengeance, snow falling steadily for 3 days straight. Sophie's finals were approaching, and she studied with an intensity that worried Jack. He'd find her at 3 in the morning surrounded by textbooks, Grace asleep in the bouncer beside her desk. "You need sleep," he'd tell her. "I need to pass these exams," she'd counter, but she'd let him lead her to bed, let him take Grace to the nursery. One night he found her crying over her pharmacology textbook. "I can't do this. It's too much. Everyone else has time to study properly, and I am trying to memorize drug interactions while teaching Grace not to eat crayons." Jack sat beside her, gently closed the textbook. "When's the exam?" 3 days. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. Emma and I will take Grace to my parents in Boston for the weekend. You'll have 3 solid days to study without interruption." "Jack, no, I can't ask." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Actually, I'm insisting. Your parents barely know about me." "They know enough. They know you make Emma happy. They know you've brought life back to the house." He hesitated. "They know you matter to me." Sophie looked at him for a long moment. "I matter to you. You know you do." "Do I? Because sometimes I think you're just enduring this situation until I can leave." Sophie, "No, let me finish. I see the way you look at me sometimes, like you want to say something but can't. I feel the way you pull back just when things feel close. And I understand you're scared. I'm scared too. But Jack, I'm not going anywhere. Not in 2 years, not in 10 years. This is my home. You're my—" She stopped searching for words. "You're what?" "My person. You're my person, however that looks, whatever that means to you." Jack's carefully constructed walls crumbled. He pulled her into his arms, held her while she cried from exhaustion and frustration and something deeper. "You're my person too," he whispered into her hair. "That's what terrifies me." They took Grace to Boston that weekend. Jack's parents, who hadn't seen him truly smile in 2 years, were so thrilled by the baby and by their son's obvious happiness that they didn't ask the complicated questions. Emma entertained them with stories of baby Grace's adventures, and Grace charmed them by taking her first independent steps in their living room. "She walked," Emma screamed. "Dad, did you see? She walked." Jack had filmed it on his phone to show Sophie later. 3 wobbling steps from the coffee table to his father's outstretched arms, accompanied by delighted laughter from everyone. "She's a natural athlete," Jack's father declared, helping Grace stand again. "Going to be a runner like her." He trailed off, uncertain how to classify relationships in this unconventional family. "Like her grandpa Jack," Emma supplied easily. "Right, Grace." The baby babbled agreement, or maybe just nonsense, but it made everyone laugh. That night after the children were asleep, Jack's mother cornered him in the kitchen. "So Sophie, what about her?" "Don't play dumb with me, Jackson Turner. That girl is in love with you, Mom. And you're in love with her. It's complicated. Love always is. But Jack, honey, you've been dead for 2 years. I watched you at Sarah's funeral, saw you disappear into yourself. And now you're alive again. That girl and that baby brought you back to life. She's 19, Mom. She's a mother. She's been through more than most people twice her age. And she looks at you like you hung the moon." His mother took his hands. "Sarah wouldn't want you to be alone, Jack. She'd want you to grab happiness wherever you found it." "How do you know what Sarah would want?" "Because I knew Sarah. She loved you more than anything except Emma, and she'd be the first to tell you to stop being an idiot and admit you love that girl." When they returned from Boston, Sophie had passed all her exams with flying colors. She met them at the door, glowing with accomplishment and relief. "I did it straight A's," Emma whooped and hugged her. Grace, newly mobile, toddled toward her mother with determination and Sophie scooped her up, covering her with kisses. "We have a surprise too," Emma announced. "Show her Dad." Jack pulled out his phone, showed Sophie the video of Grace's first steps. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I missed it. Her first steps, and I missed it." "You were securing her future," Jack said firmly. "That matters more than a few steps." "But, Sophie, there will be thousands of moments. You won't catch them all. No parent does." He touched her cheek gently, wiping away a tear. "But you're giving her something more important than perfect attendance. You're showing her that women can be strong and educated and still be wonderful mothers." Sophie leaned into his touch for a moment before Grace demanded attention, patting her mother's face with sticky hands. "Mama, Mama, Mama," Grace chanted her new favorite word. "That's right, baby girl. Mama's here." Christmas approached again, a full year since Sophie had arrived. This time they were prepared. The tree went up the first week of December, decorated with the previous year's homemade ornaments plus new ones. Grace's handprint and salt dough, a photo ornament of all four of them from Thanksgiving. Patricia came to visit alone this time, spending an afternoon teaching Sophie to knit properly while Grace napped. "I never taught you before," Patricia said sadly. "I was so focused on appearances, on being the perfect political family, I missed so much." "You're here now," Sophie said simply. "Yes, now when you don't need me anymore. I'll always need my mother, just differently than before." They were quiet for a moment, knitting needles, clicking rhythmically. "He loves you, you know," Patricia said suddenly. "Jack?" Sophie's hand stilled. "What makes you say that?" "The way he watches you when you're not looking, the way he lights up when you enter a room, the way he's built his whole life around keeping you and Grace safe and happy. It's complicated. The best things always are." Christmas Eve brought another snowstorm, gentler than the one that had brought Sophie to them, but still enough to coat the world in white. They attended the evening service at the church in town, Grace toddling down the aisle in her Christmas dress, stopping to show everyone her new walking skills. Mrs. Chen, who ran the Young Mothers program, pulled Sophie aside after the service. "I have something for you," she said, pressing an envelope into Sophie's hand. "The church has a scholarship fund for students in the nursing program. The board voted unanimously to award it to you for next semester." Sophie opened the envelope, gasped at the amount. "Mrs. Chen, this is too much. It's exactly enough. You're going to be an excellent nurse, Sophie. The community is investing in its future." That night, after Grace and Emma were asleep, Sophie found Jack in his workshop putting finishing touches on a wooden dollhouse he'd built for Grace. "It's beautiful," she said from the doorway. "She won't be able to play with it properly for another year at least, but I wanted," he shrugged, "I wanted her to have something that would last." Sophie came closer, ran her fingers over the perfectly carved details. "Like the clock you're teaching Emma to build. Traditions matter, having something made by someone who loves you, something that lasts beyond the moment that matters." "Jack." "Yeah." "Can I give you your Christmas present early?" "It's not Christmas yet." Sophie kissed him, not on the cheek, not quick and friendly, but really kissed him. For a moment, Jack stood frozen, then his arms came around her, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Sophie, don't list all the reasons this is a bad idea. Don't talk about age or circumstances or what people will think. Just, did you want that? You know I did. Then that's enough for tonight. The rest we'll figure out as we go." She kissed him again, softer this time, then left him standing in his workshop, surrounded by ticking clocks and the dollhouse that would last Grace's lifetime. Christmas morning was chaos. Grace had figured out wrapping paper and was more interested in tearing it than the presents inside. Emma had made everyone quilted potholders in her home economics class, lumpy but made with love. Sophie gave Jack a leather-bound journal for writing down all your clock stories for Emma and Grace. Jack gave Sophie a stethoscope with her initials engraved on it. "For when you're a nurse," he said. "When, not if," Sophie noted with a smile. "Never if, always when." William Reed called during dinner, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "Sophia, I wanted to wish you Merry Christmas, you and your family." It was the first time he'd acknowledged Jack and Emma as Sophie's family. "Merry Christmas, Dad. Your mother showed me pictures of Grace walking. She's beautiful. She looks like you, actually. Same determined chin. William laughed, a sound Sophie hadn't heard in over a year. Poor child. Dad, would you like to visit maybe for New Year's? There was a long pause. I would like that very much. After the call, Sophie found Jack washing dishes, Emma teaching Grace to play with her new blocks. My father's coming for New Year's, she said quietly. How do you feel about that? Scared. Hopeful. Like maybe broken things can be fixed if you're patient enough. Jack dried his hands, turned to face her. Like clocks. Like families. He pulled her into his arms, and this time she didn't hesitate to wrap her arms around him to rest her head against his chest, where his heart beat steady and sure. We're really doing this, Mike? She asked against his flannel shirt. Doing what? Being together, being a family, being us, Jack finished. Yeah, Sophie. We're really doing this. Emma looked up from where she was building a tower for Grace to knock down. Finally, I thought you two were never going to figure it out. Emma, Jack said, embarrassed. What? It's been super obvious forever. Even Grace knew, right, Gracie. Grace, responding to her name, stood up and toddled over to them, arms raised to be picked up. Jack lifted her, and she immediately reached for Sophie, who took her, creating a circle with Jack's arms around them both. My girls, Jack said softly, including Emma with his eyes. Our family, Sophie corrected. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in fresh white. Inside the fire crackled, the tree lights twinkled, and 4 people who'd found each other through storm and chance and choice settled in for the evening, complete in a way none of them had expected, but all of them had needed. Sophie opened her notebook that night, writing another letter to Grace. Dear Grace, today marks 1 year since I found my way to this place, to these people, to the life we were meant to have. Your grandpa Jack, and yes, that's what he is, regardless of blood, gave me a stethoscope today. It's a tool for listening to heartbeats, for hearing what's happening inside. But I don't need it to know that 4 hearts beat as one in this house. We are a family little bird, unconventional, unexpected, but unbreakably together. This is our home. These are our people. This is our happily ever after, not ending, but just beginning. All my love. Mom. As the clock in the living room chimed midnight, marking the end of Christmas Day, Jack stood in the doorway of the living room watching his family. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, Grace was dozing in Sophie's arms, and Sophie herself was humming that same lullaby from their first night. Come to bed, Sophie said softly. Not a question, but an invitation, a crossing of the last threshold. And Jack, who had stopped for a stranger in a storm exactly 1 year ago, who had opened his door and his heart to possibility, who had learned that time could circle back and give you another chance at happiness, followed her up the stairs toward their future, toward their life, toward home.